Hello. Today's talk is titled, Are You Cut Out to be CEO? I was recently asked by a CEO if their job was right for them, if they were cut out for it. And I had to respond to them. And I'd like to share with you some of the thoughts that I shared with them. I suppose there are two answers here. Number one, the long answer and the short answer. And the short answer, I think, is it depends. I don't think there's any single all-inclusive job description that adequately describes the role of a CEO or what a successful CEO does. It really depends on the industry, the company, and where the organisation is on the growth curve. But speaking broadly, I think that we can make a few bold statements. The first one is that taking the example of where the organisation is on the growth curve, we can say the CEO of an early stage startup is likely to be successful by rolling their sleeves up, bringing skills to the table like creating the future, driving sales, driving new initiatives, inspiring everybody else to roll their sleeves up and to make extraordinary contributions under challenging conditions and so on. Whereas the CEO of a more stable, larger company, more mature company, probably going to be successful by being a manager of detail, maybe, communicating a vision down through the organisation, innovating, perfecting, refining process and so on. So I think that sort of makes sense, that we can imagine different kinds of competency sets and behaviours and driving forces required at different points in an organisation's growth curve. But I think that it's really a question of comparing yourself to where your own organisation is right now. I think, what does your own organisation require, given what it's trying to do, what it's trying to accomplish. Also, I think, just another comment, we often think of this successful CEO in terms of the stereotypical hard-charging, demanding, aggressive, bottom-line driven executive. Someone who is out to get what he or she wants, no matter what it takes. And if you're assuming you're not cut out for this job because that's not your profile, well, I'd urge you to step back and take another look at your role and at the role in general. Because having worked with hundreds of CEOs, I've come to a few conclusions. I can speak from a sort of a wealth of experience on this. This is not the typical profile. Some successful CEOs, for sure, fall into that category. And because of their profile, we tend to hear a lot about them, or we tend to see them. They're big and they're gregarious and they're noisy and so on and so forth. And some are strongly bottom line driven, and it's a good thing to have, but it's not the only focus for CEO. And I would make the point that habitual aggression and even being blunt or rude are definitely not requirements for success. The truth is that successful CEOs present a wide range of behaviours, of driving forces, of competencies, of acumen, and so on. But I do think they tend to share certain, let me call them, essential characteristics or traits that correlate very, very well with success in this role. And I'd like to share a few of them with you. And the first one, and by far the most important one, is authenticity. And this means being who you are, who you really are, and never pretending to be someone else. I think it's sort of interesting because you can be a successful CEO by playing to your strengths, not by trying to imitate somebody else's style and how they go about doing it. And authenticity is without doubt the most important leadership skill of all. Irrespective of your position, CEO or any position, people follow authentic people and not pretenders. The second one is a sort of a strange one, I call it humility. And what I really mean by that is the ability to put your ego aside, to recognise that you don't need all the answers to every problem, every question. You don't have to be able to do every job. And in fact, a friend of mine sent me a letter years ago. In fact, I framed it. I've up on my office wall here. And I think he was trying to explain this to me in the nicest possible way. I'm going to read out what he said to you. I've written down here, so I'm going to read the text to you. He said, Lord, thou knowest me better than I can know myself. Keep me from the false habit of thinking I must say something on each subject and on each occasion. Release me from the craving to try and straighten out everyone's affairs. Make me thoughtful but not moody, helpful but not bossy. With my great store of wisdom, it seems a pity not to use it all. But thou knowest, Lord, I want a few friends at the end. Teach me the glorious lesson that occasionally it is possible that I may be mistaken. Amen. Well, I framed the letter, as I said, and I have it hanging on the wall. I'm not sure I always follow it. I read this regularly, just to remind myself that we don't have to have all the answers. That I think that was actually the prayer of St. Therese of Avila as she was growing older. My next trait is goal achievement, and this is a characteristic I think is really important. Successful CEOs have the ability to set and achieve important goals. If you can't set them, you can't achieve them. It's a crucial factor, and if it's not in place, you're unlikely to succeed in the job. Team orientation is another one, and by that I want to be clear. I don't necessarily mean that you have to always be the team player. Lots of CEOs, successful, are not the team player in the classic sense, but he or she must recognise and be ready and willing and able to bring the team along with them and to award credit where credit is due. If you can't bring the people with you, you really can't be a CEO and you can't be a leader. And the last one I've down here is accountability. And in many ways you could say it should be the first one, but this is I say first and foremost the ability to hold oneself accountable. It's a prerequisite really to holding others accountable. If you've got it, you can be a dangerous CEO. And if you don't, you can't. It's really that simple. And accountability means you accept responsibility for what's going on right now, for the outcomes of all the choice and decisions that you're making every day. And indeed for things that you're not responsible for, but that are happening right now. You are accountable for them, and you take ownership of them and you deal with them. So I think that if all those elements are in place and other success factors that are required in your specific role match up, you should be safe enough, and there's a good chance that you can succeed in the role of a CEO. The stereotypical CEO that we mentioned is not a predictor of success, but the traits I've shared with you, I think, are. And there are a few warning signs, and if you're experiencing them, you might want to consider. One is long-term pervasive issues with stress. I mean, if you, I'm not talking about the bad day, you have the occasional bad day, or even a bad couple of days. I'm talking about this pattern of just not wanting to go to work, not enjoying your work, dread coming to work, you just won't be happy in the role and you won't be successful. And in fact, I worked with a CEO a few years ago who was experiencing this, and eventually we decided that he didn't actually want to feel this pressure, and he moved into the role of a COO in a new organisation and was much better suited and much happier and much more successful. I'm sort of in tandem with that, the idea of making finding it difficult to make decisions about people, or decisions that affect people. I mean, if you took a long, hard look at your typical working day and you realise that you really don't want to be the person responsible for making the tough decisions and having the final say, then it's not the job for you. And I think my last one is the ability to delegate. I mean, if you put too much on your own personal to-do list, it isn't going to work. To be an effective CEO, you have to delegate. You have to push things away from you. You have to empower other people, develop other people to allow them to do it. So I think that's really, really important. And so I suppose I'm saying successful CEOs display many, many different characteristics. But I think there's some core strengths or some core traits that you have to be a successful CEO. And authenticity, humility, goal achievement, team orientation and accountability. And if you have those, you should be on the right path. So I hope you found that helpful. I look forward to talking to you again.